what's really going on in the book of Luke? When entered into the book of Luke, what's really going on? We have seen from the book of Mark, the author allowing us to know what's going on there. If we're able to connect those dots, and if we are able to allow the vision of those dots to sing, we are able to see the pattern and the narrative that the author writing the book of Mark has for their John. Every book and author after this point takes what Mark has done and builds upon it, embellishes it, builds upon it, embellishes it, builds upon it, and embellishes it. Only thing is that they have the right to do so, because the author of Mark has already started the trend. The author of Mark isn't blatant. They're not blatant about anything that they're saying. The author is more figurative in all of their schemes. When you get to the book of Luke, do things change? Are things different in the book of Luke? And I realized that from the previous meeting, I might have said, because what is above was scripted so that what is below could mirror it. The ones sitting on this throne, they are, in essence, a representative of the highest. They are, in essence, the representative of the highest. And as representative of the highest, the one that sits on this throne, the one that actually sits on this throne, they are the ones that are to be considered as quote-unquote God. I'm glad that I did say that, and that was a bit vague to say, but when you look at the way that the authors are writing their narrative, I'm glad that when it came to the author of the book of Mark, I broke that down by the illustration. Because when you see the illustration and the references that the authors are using, you're able to draw a pattern for the type of character that the author has in mind. The author of Luke is no different. We are going to see that here. At this moment, we are going to see just as how the author of Mark takes from Esther, takes from Daniel, takes from Exodus, and continues taking to build up their character and the narrative around them, the author of Luke does the same thing. With them doing the same thing, we're able to get a portrait of the intended character into the intended ministry, into the intended portrait that they have of their John. So that when we're seeing what is called the highest, we're able to look at it, not from the perspective of denominated understanding or non-denominated understanding or self-cultivated understanding or inherited religious understanding. We're able to see this from the perspective of the author. That's what's important. And that's what's important because the narrative constraint that the author has to their mindset, that's what they're trying to get across to their audience. And they're using fiction to cover up what they're trying to convey because their story has to flow. So in the midst of that flow, there are references to the past. And to make their writing seem as authentic as it can, they're using references from the past. If you're just glossing over the past is Genesis to Malachi. What you're reading in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John is going to sound tantalizing and authentic. It's going to sound that way, and it's supposed to. Nevertheless, it is not authentic. It is not unique. It is not genuine. The only unique and authentic and genuine aspect about it is the fact that they're actually concealing real history within their fiction. And they're doing so through characters, through titles, and specifically when we get to the idea of the highest in context, and the throne and the possessor of that throne. Jumping into the Bible, 1 Chronicles 10, 13 and 14. 1 Chronicles 10, 13 and 14, so Saul died for his transgression, which he committed against the Lord, even against the word of the Lord, which he kept not, and also for asking counsel of one that had a familiar spirit to inquire of it. He inquired not of the Lord. Therefore he slew him and turned the kingdom unto David, the son of Jesse. This theme of disrespecting the deity of the Hebrews or the deity of the Jews, and then the deity of the Hebrews or the deity of the Jews killing you, and then overturning the throne that they gave you. This is a consistent theme, whether you're hearing about it from Moses, who did this, or Saul here, who did this, or Marcus Julius Agrippa I from the book of Acts chapter 12 that did this. The themes are consistent. The themes are consistent and they are continually used because character traits, according to how the authors are writing these things, pass down. Literal people don't. Literal people only fit into the traits that are passed down, and that's how you can know who the history is about. And concerning the throne that they're carrying, that's how you can understand the movement of that throne and the type of history that the authors are trying to convey through that movement. When entered into Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, we do our belief, we do our understanding, we do our devotional conscience justice by observing these things the way that the authors intended them. When we go off of that plane, when we go off of that track, we are liable to do damage to our devotional conversation. Once entered into Matthew to the Revelation, the philosophy is not the same as in Genesis to Malachi. It is a wrong path to take, but it can be a right path to take so long as understanding how to regulate our thoughts, our feelings when entered into these documents. These documents are not written to magnify what is in Genesis to Malachi. These documents are written to magnify an agenda specific to the ones that are writing them. Yet, although magnifying an agenda specific to the ones that are writing them, they are placing Genesis to Malachi within them, and in that, there is a way to process what is being read so that Genesis to Malachi can have the type of impact that it needs to have. To be a prophet of the highest, it is not to be a prophet of what one may think. The one that is sitting on the throne of David has a very intimate connection to the one for whom that throne belongs. The man may be sitting there. A man may be sitting there on that throne, but that throne does not belong to him. Looking into the Bible, Acts 13:22, and when he had removed him, he raised up unto them David to be their king, to whom also he gave testimony and said, I have found David the son of Jesse, a man after mine own heart, which shall fulfill all my will. Whoever is sitting on that throne of David, and that throne of David is a throne over the Jews, is a throne over Israel. Whoever is sitting on that throne, they are sitting on that throne to fulfill a specific will. What's a part of that will? 1 Chronicles 14:16 and 17. 1 Chronicles 14:16 and 17. David therefore did as God commanded him. They smote the host of the Philistines from Gibeon even to Gezer. And the fame of David went out into all lands, and the Lord brought the fear of him upon all nations. The idea of the individual sitting on that throne is to magnify the fame and the name of the one publishing the domain of that throne. It may say that the fear of David was spread, but the fear of David was not spread. How can we know that? Joshua 9:8-10. They said unto Joshua, We are thy servants. Joshua said unto them, Who are you? And from whence come ye? They said unto him, From a very far country thy servants are come, because of the name of the Lord thy God. We have heard the fame of him, and all that he did in Egypt, and all that he did to the two kings of the Amorites that were beyond Jordan, to Sihon king of Heshbon, and to Og king of Bashan, which was at Ashtaroth. This fame that is connected to David, it's not actually literally connected to David. David has his fame only because of his deity. We have to remember the times that we're living in. The times that we're living in are times of deities. It is the deity's fame that conquers. It is the deity's power that conquers. It is the deity of everything that conquers. It's no different today than when something happens and someone says, oh, God did that because they were evil, or God did that to hush the land, or God did that because they did that, Or God did this for me. I heard him. Finally, he answered my prayers. It's the same sort of mindset. The fame is not David's. The fame is not our prayers. The fame belongs to the deity. Joshua 2, 9 and 10. And she said unto the men, I know that the Lord hath given you the land, and that your terror is fallen upon us, and that all the inhabitants of the land faint because of you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did unto the 2 kings of the Amorites that were on the other side Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom you utterly destroyed. This fame that belongs to the throne, this fame that belongs to the throne, the one sitting on it is a symbol of that fame. The one sitting on it is a symbol of that fame. When one saw the one sitting on that throne, they saw the fame. They saw the fame. And when they saw that fame, they humbled before that throne and the one sitting on it, all do it in regard, not simply just to the one that was there sitting on the throne, but to the one for whom that throne is controlled by. So when you saw Saul sitting on that throne, and then you saw Saul get overturned and you saw David sitting on that throne, and then when you saw David have the kingdom overturned to his son Solomon, and you saw Solomon sitting on that throne, it's not that you're seeing a man sitting on that throne. You're seeing the representative of a fame sitting on that throne. And that's what puts you in awe. And that's where the connection to that throne comes from, because to the eyes observing it, it is apparently real that there is a throne beyond that is magnifying and that is pushing forward the work of the throne below and apparent.
Ever wondered how to truly connect with the Bible? In just 60 seconds, you'll discover a unique way to deepen your faith. Knowing Bible is a course crafted to bring you closer to the Bible and yourself. Tailored to fit your learning goals, it offers a personal journey. Through readings, reflections, and interactive classroom dynamics, you'll grow spiritually. Assignments are designed to give you space for personal devotion. This course helps you envision a devotional experience that truly suits you. Imagine a course that meets you where you are and takes you deeper. Don't miss this chance to transform your spiritual life. Click the link in the description for more information.
The relationship between the throne and the one sitting on that throne is a relationship of favor. It is a relationship of shared life. What does that mean? Psalm 44, 1 through 3, we have heard with our ears, O God, our fathers have told us what work thou didst in their days, in the times of old, how thou didst drive out the heathen with thy hand, plantedst them, how thou didst afflict the people and cast them out. For they got not the land in possession by their own sword, and neither did their own arm save them, but thy right hand and thine arm and the light of thy countenance, because thou hadst a favor unto them. This idea of favor, it is an idea that is passed down to the one that is sitting on the throne and the one that is anointed to be seated on that throne. 1 Samuel 25:29, yet a man is risen to pursue thee and to seek thy soul, but the soul of my Lord shall be bound in the bundle of life with the Lord thy God, and the souls of thine enemies, them shall he sling out as out of the middle of a sling. See, the assumption is that because David's resting with the deity, that the bundle of life concerning the deity rests within David. Because David is so connected to the deity and that bundle of life rests with David, the idea is that that throne also has within it somehow a bundle of life. Now, is this weird to say? 1 Samuel 16, 13 and 14. Then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brethren. The Spirit of the Lord came upon David from that day forward. So Samuel rose up and went to Ramah. But the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul, and an evil spirit from the Lord troubled him. See, the idea is that the throne of Israel, the throne of the Jews, belongs to their deity. That's the idea. And the idea is that whosoever will be king and whosoever will sit on the throne of the Jews is infused with the deity, is infused. Saul sat on that throne and was infused. David sat on that throne and was infused. Solomon sat on that throne and was infused. Whoever sits on the throne that is to be the throne over the Jews, that is to be the throne over Israel, the general assumption is, and we're thinking like the author, we're not thinking like you, we're not thinking like me, we are thinking like the author and authors putting these things together. There is an assumption that when one sits on this throne, they are infused. Evidence comes from the anointing of Samuel to Saul. The spirit of the deity rested upon him. Well, when he was no longer king, that spirit left, something else took him over, but that good spirit went over to the next anointed. Solomon, same thing happened to him. He was infused with the same spirit, and that same spirit moved him to judgment, which is why it is written that he is so wise in his balances. Whoever possesses that throne, it is traditionally rumored that they are to be infused with some sort of essence of the deity of the Jews. Now, who is sitting on the throne at the time that the authors of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, more specifically, in the time period that the author of the book of Luke is writing? They give us our answer. Luke 1:5. There was in the days of Herod, the king of Judea. When we are seeing Herod on the throne, we are supposed to understand, which we won't, but we are supposed to understand the traditional legacy of the one that is found and seated on that throne. And the traditional legacy of the one that is found and seated on that throne is that whosoever possesses it is infused with the spirit of the deity of the Jews. Whosoever possesses that throne, they are infused with the spirit of the deity of the Jews. When understanding this rumored tradition, this superstitious tradition, and this tradition that the Bible lays down, when understanding what that means and how that carries over to the mindset for the narrative that the author of Mark constructs and begins and that the others embellish and add on to, well, then the characters within these things, they begin to shine, and they begin to shine mightily. Because then we are able to see what this narrative is actually about, who this narrative is actually about, and why this narrative is actually about. The individual found seated on the throne of the Jews is the figurative symbol of the highest. The one sitting on that throne is anointed with the deity's spirit. The one sitting on that throne is anointed with the deity's spirit. This is passed down from Saul to David, from David to Solomon, and the legacy builds up. The throne is special because whoever sits down on it is supposed to be imbued with the spirit of the deity. When we are seeing the highest, we're not actually seeing anything supernatural, anything extraterrestrial, anything otherworldly. We are actually seeing. We are seeing the symbol that is supposed to represent the one found on the throne of the Jews. The one on the throne of the Jews, according to the perspective that the author of the book of Luke is writing with, is Herod. The highest in reality is King Herod. Is this strange to say? Of course. Is this wrong to say? No. And why? It's not strange to say, because they allow us, just as the author of the book of Mark allows their reader, by them placing references from Daniel and Esther into their narrative to form a basis for the construction of their general character, John, the author of Luke does the same thing. When it comes to the language used, they take from the past. Going to the book of Luke. Luke 1:30. Luke 1:30 reads, "And the angel said unto her, Fear not, Mary, for thou hast found favor with God." Thou hast found favor with God. Now, can the author of Luke find something from the past where one on the throne shows favor to a particular virgin, and in a situation, as the author of Luke is using and would use and will use that reference to point out what is actually going on in the life of the actual characters that they are referencing? Going into the book of Esther, Esther 2:16 and 17. "So Esther was taken unto the king into his house royal in the 10th month, which is the month Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. And the king loved Esther above all women. She obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins, so that he set a royal crown upon her head, made her queen instead of Vashti." What's going on here in the book of Luke? Luke is using language from Esther to illustrate the point that one giving the favor to the virgin is not to the pleasing of the well-favored virgin, is not a deity, but is actually a king. They are picking the scene from Esther. They are picking this scene from Esther because this scene specifically highlights a king giving favor to a choice virgin. But more than that, why is this choice virgin Esther necessary? This choice virgin Esther is necessary because the king has had a problem with his wife. He can't go as far as he wants to go with his wife because she is neglectful. She's neglectful and she doesn't serve his political agenda. She doesn't serve his political agenda. Is it possible that the author of the book of Luke is blatantly taking from the book of Esther because the individual that's supposed to represent the highest is now choosing to marry a choice virgin now after getting rid of his previous wife that did not serve him politically? Is the author of the book of Luke weaving in this Esther narrative into their narrative because this Esther narrative fits the actual scheme of the actual persons that their narrative is actually about, despite them using figurative terms and terms that they and their generation and the cult associated to them would only understand? Could there be more to this? Is this true concerning their main character? Or should I say, concerning the highest, I should say. Is it true that the highest had a wife that he left and then got a new one because it served him better politically? Is the author of Luke taking this scene from Esther and the words, placing it into their narrative to reflect what's actually going on in real life?
A genuine relationship with the Bible can be difficult. Sometimes we don't know where to begin. Sometimes we don't know how to trust our experience. Sometimes we may be afraid to get too close to our Creator. Perfecting and reforming personal religion will be your guide. This book will make sure your spiritual journey is fulfilling. Don't miss this opportunity to elevate your devotional practice. Embrace the wisdom within its pages and embark on a journey of self-discovery. Grab your copy now and take the first step towards a more fulfilling and enlightened life.
When we are hearing it being said to one, "Thou hast found favor with God," when we can understand that to the author's perspective, quote unquote, God is not a deity. Quote unquote, God is the one that is sitting on the throne due to the essence supposedly imbuing the one that is sitting on the throne. When we can understand that God, quote unquote God, is no deity, but that they are taking specifically from the scene of Esther, they're using this language. Thou hast found favor with God. Go to Esther. Found favor with the king, did that virgin Esther, that fair, that delightful, that choice young woman. This scene that they are using from Esther, it fits into the actual narrative of the individual that they're talking about, which is Herod, king of Judea. Let's review some history. Herod was a particularly gifted military leader and politician, and his power quickly grew. In 42 BCE, to solidify his position, Herod, whose Idumean heritage was viewed with suspicion by many Jews, decided to garner more local legitimacy by marrying into the Hasmonean dynasty, the Hasmonean family. He was already married to a Jewish woman named Doris, but as a second wife, he chose Miriam, the Greek form of the Hebrew name Miriam, sometimes spelled Miriam, which you can shorten that and that becomes Mary, who was the daughter of Alexander, eldest son of Aristobulus II, and Alexandra, daughter of Hyrcanus. In other words, Miriam could claim Hasmonean lineage on both her mother and her father's side. The betrothal took place when Miriam was around 12, Herod around 32. So we have our characters. The reason why Mary is called Mary is because she represents Miriam. The highest is not actually the highest. The highest is actually Herod the Great. The author of the book of Luke is using language familiar to Esther because the situation for which they are writing about fits the situation for which was written about. Continuing with history. Doris was King Herod's first wife, whom he married before he aspired to the throne and married a Hasmonean princess. She bore him one son, his firstborn, Antipater. When Herod married the Hasmonean, he divorced Doris and sent her away. There is nothing accidental in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and we've been highlighting Luke and Mark. There is nothing accidental in these books. When you get into the narrative of Luke now, because Mark already sets the trend, Mark builds everything up. They don't build it up literally, they build it up figuratively. By the time you get into Luke, by the time you enter into Luke, every character is set. The authors know who they're writing about. They know who they're writing about. They know the culture and the superstitions attached to whatever they are writing about. We don't. We can figure that out. That's not too difficult. But when we are in these narratives, it becomes difficult when our mind is not trained to allow how the author's perspective is to shine. The highest is not in reference to a deity actually. Mary is not in reference to anyone. The Son of the Highest, the Prophet of the Highest, these are all characters that are familiar to the author. The author of the book of Luke is choosing from Esther to let us know that what actually found favor with this young woman called Mary was not a deity. This was a man. This was a king. This was King Herod. King Herod found favor with Miriam, with Mary. The one sitting on that throne is imbued with the spirit of the deity of the Jews. The term highest is a code term. It is a code term. It is a code term representing the one sitting on the throne. It is Herod the Great that is encoded as the highest. It is Miriam, his wife, that is encoded as Mary. Their son is another interesting story. And the prophet of the highest, is an interesting story that is told by the author writing the book of Mark. The prophet of the highest is actually the prophet of the Herodian throne. The prophet of the highest is actually hired to spread a philosophy of the Herodian throne. And this philosophy of the Herodian throne that is supposed to be spread, the author of Mark maps out through the references that they use. By the time you get into the book of Luke, this should not be a new narrative. By the time you get into the book of Luke, this should not be a new narrative. The narrative is upheld consistently by the author of Luke due to what has been and is continually established in the book of Mark. When you get into the book of Luke, these characters, they're not supposed to be new. They are just given new names. But when able to understand how the authors are speaking, we are able to understand the direction that they are going. And the direction that they are going is a direction that is familiar only to them. And familiar only to them because their work is set to magnify a specific throne, a very specific throne, for which their philosophy and the religion that they are pumping is connected to.